Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. My name is Peggy Plur, and I'm the host of this weekly broadcast put on by SPED Homeschool, as well as the founder and CEO. We at SPED Homeschool empower families to home educate children with learning challenges, and I encourage you to check out our website at spedhomeschool.com to learn more about the resources and support we offer families. Some of the best resources we have on our website are the services offered by our partners who help fund our work, like Bookshark, who is sponsoring this broadcast. We'll hear more about their product that they offer homeschooling families of struggling learners about halfway through the show. But if you're interested in checking them out ahead of time, head over to bookshark.com. Well, each month we focus on a new topic in our broadcast and as well as our blogs. And the central topic that we're focusing on this month of November is homeschooling your child at their own pace and really maybe helping that pace out a little bit. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight as we discuss creating a unique homeschool learning oasis. And my guests tonight are David Nissan. Did I say that right, David?
Zisson with a Z.
Zisson, okay. And Nolan DeMont. I flipped those completely. So I'm going to read a little bit of their bios, but I'm going to have them introduce themselves as well. But David has worked with children in grades K through 5 in the Boston area and also worked remotely on Zoom with homeschooled children from all over the United States. He's currently pursuing his master's degree in elementary ed, and so these guys are creative. So I'm going to read this creative part of their bios too, so that it kind of gets you excited for this. But you've lived in Spain, Argentina, Italy, and Tel Aviv, Israel, where you spent 4 years in marketing communications. And then in your free time, you're a cyclist, a Boston sports enthusiast, a vinyl record collector, an artist, music producer, basketball junkie, and international wanderer. So that's awesome. And then we have Nolan, who is, you're in your third year at the University of Maryland, majoring in psychology, and he's passionate about the unschool movement, and over the previous decade has worked with children in various roles, including church camp counselor, after-school teacher, and chess instructor. And then during quarantine, he started a YouTube channel that has over 10,000 subscribers, learned the piano. That's a great thing to learn during COVID. And considers himself a passionate musician, stock market enthusiast, and lover of games. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And these guys have a business that they do together that they offer homeschool families called Creator Kids. And that website is creatorkids.com. So they're going to be talking about that during this conversation as well. And I see we have some viewers popping on. If you're watching us, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope, just know that you can make comments in the feed of wherever you're watching from, and we'll be able to see those and incorporate those in our conversation. So yeah, as we get started, I would love for the two of you to just share your background, maybe what got you so creative. Because I think we were talking about this a little bit before the show, is that creativity can be stifled. And I know I was raised in the traditional public education system, and I know my creativity was stifled, and it's taken me years. So what has worked within your lives to keep your creativity going? And then why are you so passionate about helping others in that area?
Sure. Nolan, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll start us off. So my name's Nolan, and growing up, music was always a big part of my upbringing. My mom, she was a music teacher, an early childhood music teacher, focusing on development of that very important age bracket, 0 to 5, where all of those brain processes are in rapid development, and the neuroplasticity is off the charts. It's such a key point in someone's development. And parents often think, like, how do I get my child interested in this? How do I get my child? Well, a lot of it comes down to modeling and early exposure. And so music was a big part of her life, and she wanted that to be a part of my life. So she instilled that kind of value very early on, just having me around classical music all the time. And by the time I was like 3 or 4 years old, I was like, I want to play violin. I need to start right now. And she's like, well, let's hold off a little bit, because she didn't want to get me into that path so quickly to where I would get discouraged in an early age. Like oftentimes this can happen where parents, they want their kids to start off an instrument too early. And they often come to her and they're like, I want my kid to play the violin. I want my kid to play the piano. They're 3 years old. And my mom's like, slow down. Like, there's a certain amount of discipline that comes with playing an instrument and being able to sit still. And oftentimes when you're 3 years old, you just don't have that.
Very few kids that do. Yes.
Exactly. But over time that I was 6, and then I started the instrument, and there were ups and downs throughout the process, but it eventually culminated in my capstone project, which was I played the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. If any of the listeners in the audience are familiar with that piece, it's a 27-minute piece. It was one of the best experiences just to be able to share that in front of a whole auditorium of people. And that inspired me to start playing piano as well. So that was my kind of, I went to college for a couple of years. I left college because I had so many things I wanted to do outside of college. And one of those was playing piano. And it's amazing how when you already have learned an instrument, the second instrument is so much easier than the first. You just have all of the building blocks in your mind for how do I practice this kind of thing? How do I learn? And I think that's a really important part of education. It's not just like intaking material and you got to do this. You got to like how to learn, how to think, these kinds of processes, and also maintaining the passion. So there's my answer. I could go on for the whole hour, but I'm going to just.
Well, we'll be excited to hear what David has to say too.
Sure. So I think that I've always been a very creative person. I was kind of raised in it. My father, prior to being a lawyer, was actually a professional musician. So I think that I got a lot of my musical creativity from him. And my mother was always very artistic. So I feel like I got from that side as well. But really, on my professional route really took me into the corporate world as a writer. Something that I'm very skilled at, but it's not really something I'm passionate about. So, I mean, I was working in marketing communications for a variety of tech companies both in Israel and the United States. And I was realizing that I was getting burnt out on writing about cluster computing and cybersecurity, and these were very kind of dry subjects for me as a creative person. So I transitioned into working with kids, and people had always kind of told me I'm great with kids. So what that did for me, though, is it helped me kind of reclaim my creative muscles and really allowed me to kind of rediscover my creativity through working with kids. So whenever I'm working on an art project with kids, or making music with kids, or making film with kids, teaching creative skills is something that I'm very passionate about now. So that's why I started my business, and that's what I'm looking to do with as many kids as possible.
That's great. So, you know, what I've heard from you guys is this modeling within the home. And I want to encourage parents that this is something that you can learn, just like David was talking about, is that it's a muscle. And I'm reading a book right now called Coloring Outside the Lines, and how creativity is something that we all have within us, but we have to cultivate it in order for it to happen. And I heard that in both of your guys' responses. You were cultivated within your growing up years by your parents, but then you continue to cultivate it through your life, as you have grown up too. And so yeah, I think we too often dismiss, and I even said this, I have a degree in physics, and I'm I was guilty for saying I'm just the engineer, I'm not creative. But in raising my own children and in homeschooling, I learned to be creative because I had to work outside of the box. My kids just didn't fit that mold. And so from a parent perspective as well, we can become more creative, not only our kids, but us. So I love that. And the example that you guys have just in your own lives is evidence that you can keep it going. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. But now on the flip side, a lot of us were raised and schooled in a traditional school setting. And sometimes a lot of people that are now homeschooling had their kids in traditional school settings. What does a traditional classroom do to creativity? And just so parents can kind of understand if they have a child that lacks creativity or they themselves do, what are, I guess, some ways that the traditional classroom works against this creative mindset that we want to strive for?
So the first thing that I will say about the way that education is structured is it is currently all about telling people what to do. And that is not going to be conducive to children and ultimately adults having a vision for what they want to produce. What do they want to create? Because that's what that is what creativity is. It's about creating things. It's about producing something. And what I found as I went through the education system, the public education system in my community, K through 8, that's when my parents decided to pull me out, is that because students were not in control of their own learning, as they got older and older, and now I go to school with many of these kids, they no longer have, they don't have any awareness of what they want. And so even if you gave them the opportunity now, like, go out there, man, like, do whatever you want, create whatever you want, they don't know the first thing about doing that because they've been always told what to do. And that's really the tragedy of the system, because understanding what you want to accomplish, what you want to do, that's a skill, that's a muscle that needs to be developed. And by not allowing kids to practice that muscle and execute that muscle, they're never using it. And so then you ask kids to decide, what major are you? And it's like, I don't know. How would I know? I've been told what to do my entire life. And I have a lot of sympathy for them.
Yeah. Well, and before you answer, David, I do want to say, too, is that homeschoolers can do the same thing. Because there's a lot of homeschoolers that will buy certain books and tell their kids this is the right answer. And so we can take that model into our own homes, too. And we are just as guilty sometimes for doing the same thing as the traditional classroom because it's easy. It's an easy way to teach. So I just wanted to make that. We're not beating up the public education system, but this is just the traditional teaching methods that unfortunately work against creativity. All right. So what do you have to add, David?
Yeah. I would just say that I was speaking with Nolan on this subject a little while ago, and we're just discussing about kind of the rigidity of the curriculum and the curriculum requirements in a traditional school setting. There's not enough emphasis on creative skills classes. Not just the creativity to be able to choose what kind of class you'd like to take, but just to have that as an offering, really. I feel like the arts are often neglected, and there's a lot that can be gained from not just a painting class, but something in digital music, something in digital art. There's real world professional examples of the necessity for these skills later on in life, and to create those building blocks early on. I feel like is a very important thing that is not being emphasized enough in traditional school curriculum. So
and we're becoming a much more visual society too, and so those jobs are becoming more plentiful, and here we don't have the students that have that capability, like Nolan was talking about, to stretch their minds in that direction. And it almost is painful when you try to do that, and when you haven't been doing it for so long, and it's like you're trying to force creativity, which should be like a natural flow.
Yes, and especially if a kid is interested in it, it should be available. And I feel like it should be kind of a requisite if you're going to require math or any other kind of other subject, which I completely understand the value of. But I feel like it's being neglected to the point where it's just being kind of brushed aside a little bit. And I think that it's a very important skill in today's society and for kids in general.
Right. Yeah. That's so true. We have a viewer that said that she felt like I was expected to know what I wanted to study in college by 6th grade. And I remember my parents saying, "So what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I heard this last year, and I think this is a really good way to flip that around, is there's a doctor named Dr. Kathy Cook. And she was interviewing my daughter and a whole bunch of other teens on a stage. I was speaking at a teleconference, and she's like, "I need all the teens that are here." My poor daughter, she does not like being on the screen. She had to get up and be on live TV. But she made the comment while these teens were up there. She said, "The thing to ask them is not, what do you want to be?" She said, because within their lifetime, they will switch careers at least 4 to 7 times. Not jobs, careers. She said they need to know what they're good at. And I really want to focus on what Nolan and David are talking about, because a lot of our kids aren't good at math and reading and writing. But they are good at some very creative things. And so to cultivate them is so important. And so that's it's so important, instead of asking that question, because that's just a killer right there. I don't know. Were you guys pressured in your home environment? What do you want to be when you grow up?
Puts a lot of weight on your shoulders, a lot of expectations, and a lot of anxiety that it's going to produce in these children's lives. So I can't agree with that more, to know what you're good at versus what you're going to be when you grow up. I mean, it's a very good point, Peggy. I really agree with that.
In terms of my own experience with feeling that pressure, I wasn't necessarily told by my parents, "You need to make this decision." But that doesn't mean that you don't feel the societal weight pushing up against you of, like, okay, I've already changed my major once. Okay, I've already changed my major twice. At this point, I mean, this is my 3rd major, in psychology. And part of the difficulty for me was I did have so many interests. And at the end of the day, we live in a very specialized society, or something that prioritizes, you're going to do this one thing, and you're going to do it really well, and you're going to do it all the time. You're going to do it 40 hours, not even 40 hours a week anymore. You're going to do it 50 to 60 hours a week these days. Exactly. And I mean, we can have a whole conversation about how we've kind of got our work-life balance out of whack in the United States. But I think another big thing to point out is that there's definitely an intergenerational gap where there's people making decisions who are in one generation about kind of that are applying to this current era and the future era. That is just, technology has changed things so quickly that the people in charge of making decisions in the political sphere, and they don't have a clear idea of just how much society has transformed. And so
it just can't keep up because it's moving so fast and changing so quickly. And again, this is where this creativity element comes in, is that when you can think of a solution to make a switch when it's been so rigid. And, you know, I see these organizations that are so top heavy, to make a decision takes months. Well, your competitor who has a couple people can make a change overnight, and you just can't keep up. And I think it's the same in our brains. You know, we can get locked into those processes and say, well, I have to do this step and I have to do that step, and then the end product will come out. Creativity doesn't always work that way. I'm pretty certain that you guys, when you have worked on music, or I don't know if you've written any, or, you know, come up with artwork, it comes in spurts, doesn't it?
Yeah, some of the best ideas come when you're doing absolutely nothing and you don't think you're quote unquote being productive. In fact, one of the biggest inhibitors, I think, to creativity is just root productivity. Like when you're constantly doing, like, I need to get this done, that's the time when you were the least creative, because you are solely restricted to, I'm doing this objective task right now. It's when you allow your mind to wander. It's when you don't have things that are constantly occupying your cognitive processes. When you're just sitting in the shower, that's when the creative juices start to really flow.
Right.
Some of my best ideas have come in the shower. I think many for that.
You just have to have a notepad in there. Yeah. So David, as a teacher, I want to pose this question to you from one of our viewers. Leanne says, I like what you said to ask what they're good at, but how do I balance it with necessary subjects?
I feel like, I'm not necessarily an expert in homeschool curriculum that applies further than, my knowledge of the creative arts. I wouldn't feel comfortable teaching a math subject, but, with that said, I feel like there does need to be a balance. There needs to be kind of going with what your child is interested in, like you had talked about, Peggy, and really kind of honing in on what they're interested in. If they're interested in creative stuff, by all means. But I do understand the need and just the necessity for something that's a more technical subject that they might not dig quite as much, like a math or a reading. But I that can be just as important at some junctures. So,
yeah, we've got another creative minds homeschooling said, my son is creative in writing stories. He tells me them and I write them for him. I'm so proud of him for his skills. He's also good at violin and gymnastics. And
awesome.
And so even within those subjects, our kids can be creative. But as this mom says, I write them down. So the writing is not stifling the creativity.
Right.
And so there are some ways.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Creative writing, storytelling. That is, within what I was working in before in marketing communications, there was that kind of drier stuff that I was doing, but then there's other pathways that allow for creativity within the corporate space as well, in corporate storytelling and finding the narrative of a certain brand, things like that. Yeah. So there are real world applications to creative storytelling that are very important. So.
And we are such a story oriented I mean, just naturally, in our human instinct is to attach to stories, and we've moved so far away from that. I know when my kids finally, they engaged. I thought history was so boring because nobody ever told me it. There was people involved, other than these names I had to memorize, and I was really, this is somebody's life. Oh, I get it now. But yeah, when you can, it sits deeper in us, and that, so it definitely will draw on that. And my kids got super creative with lots of subjects. I mean, I would replace whatever the thing was in the math problem, because my son, with his dyslexia, he didn't always, he would get stuck on words, because we used this math program that was out of Asia, and it talked about prawns, and he'd get lost in, well, what is a prawn, instead of listening to the word problem. So I had to change them into superhero words. And when I added, like Batman had this many, whatever, he would get the answer instantly.
Yeah.
And it just had to do with my creativity being added in there. But then, my kids learned to copy that too over time. And yeah, it's.
I like that you mentioned that, Peggy, with your own story with changing the wording around in order to kind of accommodate his learning style. And another listener referenced writing down the stories that her son tells.
Right.
And I the way I apply that to my own life is I found that I often am much better at producing my ideas when I'm speaking them. And because I'm able to do it while I'm walking around my place. I'm a big pacer. So I walk around my space, and I just have my phone, and I have my notes app on my phone, and I just start speaking. And I found, like, my goodness, I can write so much more this way than I would be able to if I were just sitting on a laptop trying to type things out.
Yeah.
So these there are these little mechanisms that we can use to not only increase creativity, but also just more stuff is being created by these small little changes.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, David?
No, but I like that. I gotta work with the notes app and the mic more often.
I find in the morning I do my Bible study, and I write out I do a devotion, and I actually have my own podcast that I do that on. But I find things coming to mind, like, out of my mouth while I'm speaking. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, I never saw that while I was actually spending an hour reading that. But it just came out of my mouth. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, that's kind of the way it works. And I think when people are verbal processors, and we don't do enough verbal processing, it goes back to that storytelling engagement that we were talking about. And yeah, I know you guys teach like art classes and chess, and so those are different ways to engage like logical thinking as well as creative thinking, but using, fine motor skills in the midst of that. So yeah, we have a couple minutes before our halftime cut to hear from our sponsor. But do you see a lot of connections when you're working with students, when you engage in those activities, that they have these aha moments, or that you find that that while they're working on something, that all of a sudden there may be just a spark that in a new direction?
I've found, if I can take this one, I've found that there can be maybe not necessarily always an aha moment, but a cumulative effect of the confidence that they're building by participating in the activity. And again, exercising that creative muscle. I work with a child, with a homeschool family, and one of the children is on the autism spectrum, and she never thought of herself as an artist. And I think that over time, I've been working with her for about 9 months now, you really see it in her, not only in her work, but in her confidence. And she considers herself an artist now, and she's really able to build that kind of confidence in the artwork. So, yeah, I see that a lot in terms of the creative spark, that cumulative effect.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. Is that anxiety? You have to let that anxiety down to open that creativity up, because we put so many walls about, and especially kids on the spectrum. My kids are all on the spectrum, so I get this a lot in my home, is I have to do it perfect or else it's not good at all. And it's getting over that. Well, it's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be the same every time, but that doesn't mean that it's not good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to give you guys a quick break, and we're going to hear from our sponsor, and then I'm going to bring Nolan and David back, and we're going to continue talking on this subject. So I'm going to bring up a couple things, and then we're going to hear from our sponsor, Bookshark. So, all right. So, Bookshark was the best thing I've done for myself and my kids. That's what Dana said. Tracy says, I definitely regret not starting Bookshark sooner. It's been such a great fit for our family. Well, we at Sped Homeschool agree. We've heard from a lot of parents that Bookshark is a really good fit for lots of families who have struggling learners, and for parents who need something a little more structured. So, how can you jump on this Bookshark bandwagon? Well, start by heading to bookshark.com. On their website, you can request a free catalog, download samples, and see scope and sequence charts of what's taught at each level. There's also a blog at bookshark.com/blog with hundreds of articles written for parents to just see how to use the Bookshark method, and maybe how to get through some of those teaching struggles. Another example is they have free unit studies, and you can try out the Bookshark way of literature-based learning at bookshark.com/freebies. And the new unit study they have for free this year is on volcanoes. Maybe a good thing to do over your Christmas time and make a change. Well, let me just share a few more quotes. Jill says, we switched to Bookshark Language Arts this year. This was the best decision we ever made. We love how everything ties together. I can't tell you how grateful I am for Bookshark. We're looking forward to adding more subjects next year. And Catherine says, pulling my kids out of public school and getting Bookshark's full program saved our sanity. It was the best parenting decision we've made. We are so much happier now versus the kids staring lifelessly at screens all day. The open and go component is of high quality literature for science, history, and language arts is amazing. Well, see if Bookshark is the best fit for your family, as it is for these moms. Visit bookshark.com to get that free catalog, and then add /freebies to get the free unit study. So thank you again, Bookshark, for just sponsoring this episode, and for being a Sped Homeschool partner. We have a lot of partners. If you check out our website at spedhomeschool.com, you will find them, including Creator Kids, where David and Nolan are joining us from. And I'm just going to give you guys a little plug again with your website. It's at creatorkids.com, and so it's Creator with a C, but then Kids is spelled KIDZ.com. So if you're listening on the podcast and you don't see that, that is where
his last name Sisson.
I had to have the Z in there.
You had to have the Z.
He said a place to figure it out. Where
he sent me a list of what do we want to call our business, and it was like a bunch of things. Good. And we were like, that's the one right there with the C.
Well, it shows a little bit of creativity, and you have to be a little bit out of the box to do that. So, which I fully embrace. I love doing things that are creative. I think everybody kind of thinks I'm a thrill seeker a bit, but that's okay. It's a lot of fun, and might as well make life fun. So yeah. Well, thank you for all that you guys have shared in the first half an hour. these guys shared a video with me, and I'm going to link it in the YouTube description about kids just throwing tantrums and this like massive storm, and then all of a sudden this calm coming over in this oasis. That happens when our kids are engaged in creative outlets. And it is so true, those meltdowns. And we hear from parents all the time, how do we get around those meltdowns? And it really is. Engaging them in something that's fun and creative can really turn things around. So when we talk about igniting creativity, does in helping a child learn, and what about igniting creativity helps a child learn and calm the learning environment?
Yeah. So I see in my work, I see the arts as kind of a form of meditation. It's a very meditative practice to be able to kind of express your creative energy. So in that sense, it can be a very relaxing and have a very calming effect on both the child, and as you mentioned that video, I mean, it's going to also calm down the parent as well.
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah, the arts can be very meditative. It's an expression of what's going on, maybe on the inside subconsciously. But it's also an expression. It's also you're utilizing fine motor skills and lots of other kind of hand-to-eye coordination. I think Nolan also had a good bit on this one regarding chess.
I'd love to hear that.
Well, I have. But before I talk about chess, I do want to point out the concept of flow state, and I think that's kind of a relevant conversation here with creating a space where you have a certain amount of focus, right? That is being harnessed by something being just challenging enough where it's super engaging, but also not overwhelmingly challenging to the point where it's stressful. And that's like the perfect balance where this kind of flow state and this sort of calmness we were referring to takes place. It kind of relates to a well-known concept in psychology where there's at the point where you have too much stress in a situation, that's the point where exam scores or any sort of performance declines. But they actually they found that you need a certain level of quote unquote stress in order to pique someone's interest to the degree where they're able to get really focused in something and not just like bored with it.
Right.
If the task is too easy, too boring, then performance declines. So that's kind of, and then you also get very antsy and agitated. Like you're not locked in. And so,
so there's kind of like this zone that you want to be in where it's not too stressful, but it's not stressful at all.
Yeah.
So nothing's going to be challenging enough. And so trying to find that. And I think that's, as parents, we try to strive for that. It's sometimes hard when you first start homeschooling to find that. And I guess I've never actualized doing that, but I'm sure I have with my own kids. But yeah, that's a really good point for parents to think about. So, yeah.
David, you mentioned I had a point about chess.
Oh,
do you mind refreshing my memory about?
You had mentioned to me that you were talking about chess as allowing as an expression of your personality and your personal style.
Oh, yeah.
And how you're kind of aligning with your own assessment of risk in life.
Oh, yes. So I am a firm believer, and one of the things that attracts me to the game of chess is this idea of the way that one plays chess is kind of the way that they approach life. And there's so many different styles to go about playing chess, and you can kind of try out different styles and see what works for you. I am a very aggressive chess player, and I'm also very aggressive in terms of how I approach my life. Like, I don't wait for things to come to me. I go out and get things. I don't, and sometimes that leads to a certain level of impatience. And so these skills that apply to your life about, okay, how aggressive do I have to be versus overextending myself? Because that's something you can easily do in chess as well. You're, in a sense, able to practice life skills within a game. And that's some of the creative components of playing this game, and why I appreciate it so much, because you don't really think like, okay, chess, it is a logical game, but you don't immediately think creativity. And I think part of that is there's a concept about chess being mathematical, logical. There are right moves, there are wrong moves. That's all true. But when we're first starting out as chess players, and when we're developing our style of playing, it is necessary and it is important to just play, to just express yourself on the board. And you're going to make mistakes, and that's like, and when you play people who are better than you, they're going to punish you for those mistakes, and then you're going to be able to refine your style over time. It's going to become more sophisticated. It's really a lot how life works in general.
Right.
So
So would you say that is something that could be then translated into other gameplay? Because I know there's a lot of people that do like game schooling, where you can kind of figure out just how your child would most comfortably approach life by playing games with them.
Certainly. Yeah.
Because I never even thought of that as a discovery way to deal with our kids, but in helping them to develop that and be okay with it too.
In many ways, life is a very complex sort of game, and so all of these different individual games, whether it's a board game or whether it's a card game, it's kind of honing in on a particular set of skills, a particular way of going through life, and you can take that and you can apply it to your broader life and within domain. So,
yes, my kids are big gamers, and I am not. I try. Oftentimes the rules are just way too complicated for me. But this is a generation gap.
Yeah.
So let's dive into specific activities that you find help children open up and be more creative or regain creative ground where it's been lost, maybe through more traditional teaching, learning, even just traditional methods of instruction as parents. I think we start our kids young with how we think we need to train them. And so what are some activities that can really open up some doors?
So in my experience, in working with children, I feel like you have to kind of, and I've incorporated this into the classes that I offer, you have to kind of try to lock into what is going to stimulate the child. Okay. So when I'm talking about something like a 3D clay creations class, the fact that it's very tactile, that you're able to touch and mold and manifest it, that has a very powerful appeal to a certain age group of children, but also to children with disabilities or children on the spectrum. It allows for them to kind of have a physical manifestation of what they're interpreting in their head and being able to touch and mold it into something in a tactile way.
Yeah.
Additionally, like something like drawing or watercolor, those are important fine motor skills. That's the patience that's needed to develop. To really get a nice piece of artwork, the amount of patience that is necessary is a life skill that I think is very important. And something like some of the digital classes that we offer, something like a garage band, which is a very powerful but very intuitive music production suite that is definitely accessible for children. That kind of opens up things in a musical way. Doors that might have been closed previously can be opened up with an iPad. And it's great because it's free software, and there's a lot of, it helps kind of facilitate the learning of other instruments. The fact that you're able to learn a variety of different sounds and kind of how to piece them together and produce something that's coherent and beautiful. So there's a lot that's another one. Digital painting and iMovie, those are also creative skills that you're learning with creative expression and learning a creative software. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's definitely specific activities that can really move those gears, and especially with the iMovie, with the creative storytelling as well. So just like we spoke about, I mean, you can come up with your own movie, your own commercial, your own, mini story, however you want to kind of put it together. So, yeah. I love that, talking about accessible, but not accessible to the point of, well, this is all you can do, but there's an end product to show and to share as well. Absolutely.
And so I heard that, and kind of what you were talking about is, you're increasing that creativity in the middle, but you're making it easy enough that it's not, this obstacle or big thing that the child has to get over to engage in it. But over time, they produce something that they're so excited about sharing too.
Yeah, and it's something they can be proud of.
Right. Yeah. And that just spurs them on even more, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Just like the student you were talking about, that is now calling herself an artist. So, yeah. To
know that they can do that, to have that kind of confidence, it's a very valuable, very valuable thing in life. To have the confidence to know that you can do something, that you have a skill, you have an ability, and you can produce things. So,
right. Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. So, you got anything to add to that, Nolan?
To more focus in on a particular technique that I found very much engages kids opening up. In school, because people are so accustomed to, I'm going to answer this question, and it's got to be the right answer, right? If I don't get the answer right, then I'm wrong, and I embarrass myself in front of all of my peers, and that's a horrifying experience.
That shuts down the creativity. Yes,
it really does shut down the creativity. And there's also not much of a dialogue there. That generally goes, does anyone know the answer to this question? Yes, that's correct, or that's wrong. And then there's nothing. There's nothing else. There's no okay, what was your thought process behind that? Right? What's your thinking? And this is one of the questions that I often ask when I'm working with kids in chess, because something I love about chess, and something I pride myself on in terms of kind of an educational philosophy, is teaching individuals how to think. And part of being able to think is being able to articulate exactly what cognitive processes, what you're thinking, what's going on in your head. And that is when someone is just able to describe, okay, why did I move a piece here? And walk me through exactly what they're thinking. That's what I found really gets kids opened up and it's more kind of into conversation. And then you can kind of point out okay, wait, what would you do after this move? Right. And you can throw a little counter back at them, and they're like, oh, I didn't see that. Right. Okay. Let's do, and you get to kind of form, different routes for their, I guess, for them to articulate their thought process. They get to articulate it in this way, and they get to, then you change it up and like, okay, what happens here? And they get to create a whole nother sort of thought process over here. And that's.
Yeah. Well, it's not the one answer is right, because there's multiple ways that you can approach, a chess move. And, and so that whole change of mindset, that there is not always one right answer, that opens doors to creativity that definitely aren't. I mean, and the same thing has to come with drawing or with music is, well, what if we change it up just a little bit here? What's going to happen? And have that inquisitive mindset versus, well, I've got to search and get the right answer, or I'm not going to get it right, and I'm just going to have to give up, or wait till somebody else comes along with the right answer for me. So those are really great points that you make, and I think as parents, I know when I taught my kids, and even thinking, teaching myself things, I don't always think that way. So that was a good reminder. Thank you. So I would love if you guys have any stories to share of just, I know, David, you shared about your one student on the spectrum who has opened up. What are some others? We've got just a couple minutes left, but is there any stories you have to share with our audience of just transformations or things that have happened to students that you've worked with as you've helped them explore these creative outlets?
I mean, I'm thinking of a kid who, so when the pandemic hit, I mean, I was working with some homeschool families from all over the United States, and this one boy, actually from Maryland, he was like very, he was very kind of unsure of himself in his music abilities, in his drawing abilities, in any kind of creative facet. And he seemed like his father was kind of pushing him into some of these classes, which I was very grateful for because he was an awesome kid. But it was awesome because he really kind of opened up and understood that he had some ability in this. I had him in my digital painting class, where we all painted the same picture of a very colorful bird, and he did a great job on that. I'm also thinking of some of the music he made in my garage band class. So again, it goes back to the level of confidence and knowing what you're good at and discovering what you're good at, and maybe what you previously didn't know you could do, and that's a very powerful thing. So
that's awesome. You got anything to add to that, Nolan?
I wanted to share a story about a student that I had in the aftercare program that I worked with in my years out of college. There was one particular kid, and he had incredibly athletic, high energy, very charismatic kid. But one thing that this individual struggled with at times was keeping his body still. And it kind of goes into this theme of calmness. And one day I designed an activity, and this is the kind of activity I didn't really expect many kids to be too interested in it, because when kids hear meditation, there's generally a lot of negative associations that come along with that for a kid like, oh, this is boring. I have to sit here and
not talk. Yeah.
And so I did this activity thinking like maybe we'll get 1 or 2 students and it'll be a kind of an intimate experience. However, never in my wildest dreams did I think this kid was going to be the one who was like, yeah, let's do it. And I mean, just to see, I was kind of took him on a shamanic journey. He was lying down on the table, and he closed his eyes, and I kind of guided him through this whole meditation process, and he was really into it. And there were moments where, like his peers would come up to him and like poke him, and for a moment, like he would smile, and then he would come back in. You'd like recognize, like, no, I actually want to return to this state that I was in. I appreciate it so much that even I want my peers to leave me alone. You could tell that was going on, and that was really cool to watch someone who perhaps would have had a negative association with non-athletic, non-dynamic kinds of activities.
Right, yeah.
To see him get into this sort of zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that exposure to things that you haven't been exposed to, and just give it a try. I mean, we can say I'm not good at this, or that's just not for me. But if we don't try it, we just don't know. And our kids are the same way. I often told my kids that, we'll go try out a class. I wouldn't sign them up right away. It's like, let's try something. And you have an out if this is really not something you really want to do. But, of course, if you sign up for the class, you're going to show up now because you said you wanted to do this. So there's a give and take about that, too. So those are great stories. I love that. Both of those examples are just, pushing us in the right direction. That it is good to challenge our kids with things that we don't do. And even as a family, to experience things, different than what you've always done. And I have a husband that is very much, this is what we've always done. So, and I was like, can't we go to another state and go camping instead of where we've always gone? So,
I want to add one more thing too, with kind of tying this back to our earlier conversation on modeling as well, because like having our kids try new things is a fantastic. It's exactly what young minds need to be. They need to be doing constantly, like testing your comfort zone. It's how you grow. However, they're going to look to you as a parent for leadership in that regard. And they're going to look if you are not upholding your end of like trying new things and you have certain fears and your kid recognizes like, well, they're not doing that, right? Why are they forcing me to do this? They're going to see you as a massive hypocrite and they're going to provide resistance. But if they see you as, okay, my parent is trying new things too, much more likely to follow suit and want to be like you. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. But it's also putting good mentors in their lives, which you guys are. And I want you to talk a little bit about your website and the courses that you offer homeschoolers through creatorkids.com. Because there are a lot of people that say this teacher, this mentor in my life, this person just really influenced me. And you hear adults talk about that. And so I just encourage you parents, if you're feeling like this is just not up my alley right now, I will work on creativity with my kids, but I need some injection in there. And so that's where we're, taking advantage of classes that David and Nolan offer are just really helpful. So can you guys talk a little bit about what you guys offer at Creator Kids?
Sure. So we offer kind of 3 kind of categories of classes, and these are what we like to call creative skills classes. So the first would be in our non-digital section. And that would be 3D clay creations, where you have modeling clay, and we're making all different kinds of cool creatures and different kinds of food out of the clay. The next is watercolor painting, where we go over different kinds of techniques, and then we'll typically have like a picture that we'll be trying to represent artistically, and we'll take a vote on what image we're going to have as the class. And then the drawing class is very similar to the watercolor class, but it's using, alcohol-based markers or just colored pencils, whatever kind of colors you'd like to use around the house, that you have around the house, rather. The next category would be our digital classes, and those are iMovie, GarageBand, and digital painting. So those cover kind of the musical arts, filmmaking, and the digital painting, which is pretty self-explanatory, but digital artwork. And then the last category is chess, which is Nolan's expertise.
That's my domain.
And it's really up his alley. And he has a beginner's class and an intermediate class. And the cool thing is that for the non-digital, they come in packages of 6 classes. The non-digital classes come in two classes. The digital classes are 6 classes, and then chess is 6 classes as well. So.
That's awesome. So you guys have really honed in on what works and some. It sounds like very unique offerings, more than I've heard from a lot of online courses. A lot of them are just tutoring, and so. But I just want to encourage, as you've listened to this broadcast, to really think about how important these creative outlets are. They aren't just extras. I think we always tack them on as extracurricular, all those things. And so yeah. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. We are over our hour, but it has been a wonderful discussion and a lot of fun getting to know both of you and just all that you had to share with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peggy. We really appreciate you having us on.
Yeah, you guys were definitely inspiring. So just keep up doing the good work that you're doing, and I can't wait to hear how you grow.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to thank all of our audience for joining us on this episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations. This is just one of the many resources that we have at SPED Homeschool and make available to families who are home educating students who are struggling learners. And so I also want to send out a special thank you to Bookshark for sponsoring this episode. And you can find out more about them at bookshark.com. So next week, we are going to be focusing on a topic in the same realm, but how challenges in creativity increase student success. And so we're going to add the challenges in there as well. And that's kind of what we talked on just a little bit about, creating that sweet spot of making it challenging, but not too challenging. And so my guest next week is going to be kind of honing in on those things. So that's what we're going to focus on then. And so I hope you all can join me. But in the meantime, make sure you stay connected with us on our website at spedhomeschool.com and also our learning platform and community platform, empoweredhomeschool.org. And of course, don't forget to visit David and Nolan's website at creatorkids.com. So thanks again, guys. This was great. Thanks all for joining us, and we'll see you next week right here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Bye, everybody.
What do you do when the world around you is falling apart? It's amazing to me how many people are breathing air. They're going about their business and doing the things you're supposed to do. But if you really ask them, they know that on the inside, they are spiritually and emotionally and relationally dead. If we're not careful, all of us can experience that death. When what we need to do, even as the world around us is falling apart, we need to learn how to march when it would be easier to stay where we are and die. Join me each week on the March or Die Show as we discuss that and so much more.